So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shireen Ash. I'm a librarian at the Corte Madera Library, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you here today to this talk with Toni Gattone. A little introduction about Toni, and then she'll get started with this talk. Toni fell in love with gardening in her grandfather's backyard in Chicago, but it wasn't until she moved to Northern California that her passion began to bloom, pun intended. Toni became a master gardener in 2011 and headed their public seminars program for 2 years. That's when she found a way to give back to the community by presenting edible landscaping seminars. Eventually, she created her adaptive gardening talk to help gardeners grow their resilience so they can garden with ease and joy. Today's seminar, Adapting Your Landscape to Be Resilient and Fire Smart, combines master gardeners' research-based information for creating and maintaining a fire-wise garden with tips and techniques she shares from adaptive gardening, so you can safely do the work while taking care of your body by using the right tools to get the job done. So join me in welcoming Toni Gattone. And I want to mention that if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will read them out to you in the end, or they may be answered by a smart gardener in between. So here we go. And I will see you when we're done.
Great. Well, all right. Here in Marin County, I have to say we have so much to be grateful for. Not only do we live in a beautiful place, but we've not had a significant fire for many years. And yet we've all seen the devastation that our neighbors in Sonoma County have witnessed. And when we see that, and we know that we have an ongoing drought, it's really time for all of us to get into it, accept what is, and begin to create a fire smart landscape. And I say work towards creating a fire smart landscape, because this is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is something that we start now and we work towards. So my goal today is to bring you the latest information from Marin Master Gardeners, Fire Safe Marin, and also the Marin Wildlife Prevention Authority. It is also my intention to inspire you to incorporate some of these adaptive gardening ideas that will keep you and your family safe as you go forward. So, Master Gardeners, we're here to provide you with research-based information to dispel all those myths that you were brought up with, and to give you home horticulture, pest management, fire smart landscaping, and sustainable practices that can help you in your home garden. We do that through, presentations like this, articles in the newspaper, social media, and of course, the Marin Master Gardener website. So if I could see your faces right now, I'm sure that you remember this day, August 2020. And on this day, the smoke was so bad that our sky was orange. And that was in 2020, but the fires actually began in 2015 up at Lake County. And since then, our fires have become more frequent, more destructive, more intense, because we've got a warming planet. We see climate change patterns happening all around us, with this drought that never seems to want to end, with intense heat and high winds. All of us are collectively holding our breath. And now is the time for us to start doing something about it. So I know you're sitting there saying, yes, but what can I do? What could I possibly do that would make any difference if a wildfire came through here? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to adapt. Let's face it, if you move to snow country, one of the first things you'd have to do is go out and buy a shovel. If you move to the desert, you'd start exercising or doing your walks in the morning before it got hot. And if you lived in bear country, it wouldn't take you long to figure out you had to secure the tops of your trash cans to keep the bears out. Well, here we are in fire country. So it's important that this concept of fire smart landscaping is incorporated by all of us, because we're all in this together. And if all of us in a neighborhood start working together, our neighborhood is going to be that much safer. So I want to give you ideas of what you can do, and I want to try to make it as easy for you so that you're not as able to put it off. Without scaring you, I want you to know that this is the time to accept our reality. So the first thing I want to suggest to you is that you protect yourself and your body so that you are always safe. Some of the things that we're going to be talking about later when I get into the pruning, it can be hard work. And if you've got a bad back, bad knees, bad shoulder, this kind of work can make things worse. So it's about gardening consciously, keeping in mind what you can do, knowing what your limitations are, and then figuring out where do you need help and who can you ask? Do you have neighbors? Do you have friends that they can refer people to you so that you can get the work done? Additionally, with the high heat, like what we had just a week or so ago, it's important it's important to plan your work so that you're not working in the heat of the day. Start your work in the morning. When it starts getting hot, put it off, finish up later in the day when it gets cooler. And above all, take care of your body by making sure that you have good, sturdy shoes and quality gloves. I mean, you might want to consider even getting the long gauntlet gloves to protect your arms when you're out there pruning and taking down branches. I look at adaptive gardening in 3 ways. First is your body. And like I say, wearing the gloves, okay? Putting on an SPF 45 sunscreen before you go out. If you're going to buy apparel to keep sun off your arms or to have a good sun protection hat, look for a UPF 50 code. That'll give you the guarantee that you're buying the best sun protection that you can have. Also, when you're out there, get in the habit of switching it up. In other words, I call it my 20-20-20 rule. So that, let's say you're out there raking for a while. Well, rake for about 20 minutes. And then put down the rake and go over and maybe kneel down for a while and do something on the ground. Do that for a shorter period of time. And then maybe grab your pruners and start reaching up and pruning something above your eye level. What you're doing is switching it up, and you're not using the same muscle groups for long periods of time, because that's what's going to cause pain, okay? And that's what we're trying to avoid. The second part is about your garden and making it safe at all times. May I strongly suggest to avoid a ladder if you at all possibly can, either by incorporating a step stool that has a grab bar that you can hang on to, or hiring someone else to do it, which may sometimes be the better way. And then also clear away the debris rather than, when you're out there working away, rather than letting it accumulate, you could be creating a tripping hazard. So work for a while, clear the debris, take it to the debris can, and then go back and work again. That switching it up will make all the difference for you. And then the last part is all about tools. And I talk about tools at the end of the presentation, so stay tuned for that. The other thing that you can do to take care of your body is before you go out, is to take time to move, take time to do some stretching exercises. Maybe do some yoga or some Tai Chi. Or if you're really in the mood, put on some music and dance for 5 or 10 minutes before you go out. This may seem silly, but it's really a great way to get your body warmed up before you start working. All right. So here's my agenda, and I call it 6 steps to peace of mind. I'm going to help you to establish your priorities, to develop a plan. Learn to start at the first 5 feet of defensible space, and I'll explain that in a minute. Space plants with care so that there's room in between for them to be able to grow, and there's horizontal spacing to interrupt the path of a fire. And then beyond that, to select the right plant for the right place. If indeed you have a plant that is going to be requiring more water, and with the drought, you're cutting back on the water, that's going to mean that you're going to have plants that are going to be dead or dying. And that in itself can be not a very safe environment. And then last but not least is to make maintenance a priority. And this is the big part that we'll be getting to. But first and foremost, what is a fire smart landscape? It's healthy. It's resilient. It can mitigate embers, and it's the embers and the heat that will start a fire, even if there's not a fire for a mile. Those materials that you have in the first 5 feet around your home, if an ember should land there, your house is now in jeopardy. So there's 3 types of fire exposures. The first, of course, is direct flame contact. And I mean, excuse me, depending on, the time and the exposure, of course, direct flame contact can cause your home to ignite. Radiant heat is another one. If the house next door to you is on fire and there's enough heat coming from that, your house can ignite. But what we want to focus on are embers, wind-borne embers, because our fire departments have estimated that 60 to 90%, and that's a pretty high number, 60 to 90% of fires are caused by wind-borne embers. Burning materials that can travel, like I said, for about a mile. So if you have material such as leaves, such as mulch, such as, grass doormats or even brooms within the first 5 feet of your landscape, that can catch your home on fire. So, okay, step 1, what are your priorities? And without being able to see your face, hear your comments, I'd be willing to bet that your priorities are to keep your family, your pets, and your home safe. And in order to do that, there are some really good common sense things that you can do, but it's about planning ahead. It's about getting your landscape ready for fire season and working towards that, because it can be a big job depending on how much of a risk you have around your property. Talk to your family, know your evacuation routes, and discuss that with them. And also take the time to clear your evacuation route so you won't have to be tripping over things should you need to vacate quickly. And then, of course, if you hear about a red flag warning day, that's when you need to be prepared. And some of the people have said, that you should wet your property down when you hear it's a red flag warning. That may not be the best idea, because that could indeed take water that the fire department is going to rely on if a real fire occurs. And talk to your family about this. Get them involved. The family that gardens together stays together. And even if you've got kids, there's things that you can do to involve them so that they can feel like they can help out. Let them know what the warning signals would be and get them involved. They can go out and sweep and rake and take things from the first 5 feet. You'd be amazed if everybody understands the concepts that we're working towards today. So step 2 is to develop a plan. Well, there's a couple of things you can do. I would say the first thing you ought to think about is taking a walkabout. Divide your property up into sections. I live in a very small piece of property, so it's the front, the back, and the south and the north end. It's not too hard. But maybe your property is a little bit more larger. Do a walkabout. Take some notes. Take some photographs, and make some ideas of things that you can do for next steps. What would be your priority? And we're going to be talking about that in a minute. The very first thing you ought to think about is just doing everything you can to stay on top of removing dead, diseased, and damaged vegetation. There shouldn't be any of that on your property, but most particularly in the first 5 feet. And here we are, the first 5 feet, and I'm going to show you right here what I'm referring to. Here's the first 5 feet around this house, all in blue. You shouldn't have any vegetation here. This should be inorganic material that is clear of flammable and ember. It should be an ember resistant area, free of flammable green goods. The second part is the intermediate. And this should be the area that you can see that it goes beyond the first 5 feet. And this should be your lean, green, and clean area. Leaving room for the fire department if they come in. I'll show you a picture of it on a slide later that you'll see what I'm talking about, where fire department comes, they might just keep driving if they can't get through. And then the third part, zone 2, is 30 feet and beyond. And that is the area that is the fuel reduction zone. So you want to start here. This is zone 0. 0 to 5 feet from your house. This is the most fire resistant zone in your area. First 5 feet, blowing embers that could fall in this area are going to fall on hardscape. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the main thing is to avoid the ignition from blowing embers. This is where you want to minimize planting. This is a good picture of how to avoid having plants directly up against the house, in front of windows, next to siding if you know that it's combustible. And you absolutely need to eliminate any planting near decks, and especially under decks, where it may not be planting, it just might be weeds, for example. You also want to eliminate the fuel around your home. For example, leaves on the rooftop. This is something that we used to say, well, you should do it prior to the rainy season. I don't know. With fire season ongoing here in Northern California, this is something that we should be clearing away from our roofs all the time. Any kind of dry or dead vegetation on the roof and in the first 5 feet around your home. This means you shouldn't have firewood in the first 5 feet by any means. Even mats, doormats like this, jute or natural fiber doormats could catch fire very easily. And if that's at your front door, you won't be able to get out your front door. Stacks of wood, cans. These cans should be away from your house. Fencing, roofs, decks, arbors, trellises, and planter boxes. You want to move those away from the house, if at all possible. So here's high-risk homes. This first one in the upper left, you can see has lots of excess plant material growing around this garage. And that's definitely going to be a job that needs to be pruned back and away from this particular structure. Now, this one is amazing. I mean, I can't quite make out what that big, large plant is, but it's definitely overgrown. The house is small in comparison, and a couple of embers get into that large tree plant, whatever that is, and that house will be gone shortly thereafter. This is an amazing one. Whoops, let me go back. Hold on. Here we go. This is one that it's like, really? Can you get into the front door of this one? I've seen houses like this, and I just wonder what they would do in time of a fire. This is one that's just waiting for a fire to happen. And this one next to it, my gosh, I mean, you've got to clear away all of this vegetation and keep it thinned back and pruned and hydrated and away from the roof, the gutters, the windows, and the doors. In comparison, here's low risk. Homes like this that have planned with hardscape and low growing plants next to the house. Once again, everything is low growing, clear. The fire department has a clear view to the home. Here's where you've got, again, a good usable space that is all hardscape. The planting is much further back. And even here where you've got good ground cover, I mean, stones, any kind of hardscape. But I will point out that on this one, if you can see the underneath the home, underneath the porch, these actually, if a fire should come, could let embers in. So it might have been a good idea for them to actually put together something that would be smaller spaces so that flames can't necessarily get in underneath the house. And fencing. Consider replacing the section that is directly attached to the house. Like this one, where they've added in what looks like it is a metal here, looks like a metal gate, and then also metal, and then it picks up here with wood. This one is done with, as I go blank, this one is done with, what's it called? Hardy board. Yes, this one is done with hardy board. This is a metal fence. And this one is a wire mesh on a wood frame. Now, any of these would help immensely to keep the fire away from the house. So it's important for you to be able to have an alternate to wood fences being directly up against the house. So this is all for zone 0. So zone 0 is 0 to 5 feet. This is where you want to avoid having any compostable mulch, fencing, or furniture. 0 combustible items that are attached to the house. And that's where we're talking once again about fences or perhaps arbors. 0, whoops, one more, go back. Here we go. 0 roof or gutter litter. 0 dead branches. This is when you get your tools out and you start pruning away any of your dead branches and any branches that are within 10 feet of the chimney or roof. And then, of course, any tall plants under your eaves. Now, that's only in zone 0. That's 0 to 5 feet. So now we're going to move on to zone 1, which is 5 feet to 30 feet from the house. And this is where you want to have a lean, clean, and green environment. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about planting small shrubs, no larger than 3 feet, ground covers, and perennials. Trees, if they're green, and if they're free of dead plant material. This is where the pruning comes in, right? And make all plants accessible for maintenance. In other words, you don't want to have the plants right up against each other. Plants will need air in between. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get into horizontal spacing. Here's zone 2. This is 30 feet to 100 feet from your house. This is where it's important that you decrease the energy and the speed of the fire by eliminating dense vegetation, both vertically and horizontally. In this zone, you want wide walkways that are going to separate planting areas. This picture really does great justice to what we're talking about here. You want to create large islands with shrubs and keep wood mulch and leaf litter in this zone rather than the other 2 zones. And annual grasses should be mowed to 4 inches and to try to keep wood piles in this area with nothing combustible near the wood pile. So here's spacing the plants with care. Now this is, it's important here to look at this particular drawing on the left where you've got trees that are overlapping the roof and the chimney, and you've got branches that come down to the shrubs. I think you're getting the picture here, right? When you've got continuous vegetation that leads right up into trees, that is going to take an ember that could land way out here, and go right up this tree to your house. So, and see all these shrubs that are up against the house. This is what you want to try to move towards, where you have shrubs in distinct groups, space between shrubs and trees, low ground cover. Shrubs next to the house have all been removed, and the tree is thinned and pruned up. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Another thing you can do is to plant in islands. I think this photograph shows really well that when you have islands with non-combustible plants in between, that will interrupt the path of the fire. And then beyond that, here's a few pictures that will help you to create fuel breaks. You can see here with the gravel that has been clearly separated from the wood mulch. Here you've got flagstone, but a big open area with very low growing plants. And then over here, where you've got it's probably decomposed granite. between all of these plantings. So it's a good way to really break up the line of the potential fire. Vertical spacing is important to keep in mind from the standpoint that you want to keep the fire from moving from the ground up to the tree. So by doing that, you want to take all of the length of the limb up all of the trees to 6 feet, or overall a third of the height of the tree. And then additionally allow 3 times the height of the shrub to the lowest tree limb. This is what they mean by tree ladders right here. If this shrub is high enough, the fire can go right up and catch this tree on fire. So here you go, 6 feet or 1/3 the size of this tree. And here you have fire ladders. Here we talk about horizontal spacing. And for here, you can easily see in this photograph, this drawing, that you've got a shrub and you want twice the distance between that shrub and the next one. And the same thing with trees. You want to keep the trees separated rather than having them all next to each other. Here you are, if you're on a slope, that distance between shrubs and trees gets larger. It doubles in size. And here you are with a slope that is now greater than 40%. And the difference that is going to make is that you really have to do some serious clearing in order to make for horizontal spacing when you're on a slope. Step 5, the right plant for the right place. This is the Master Gardeners, the thing that we live by. And we're often asked the question, well, what are the safest plants to put in my garden? And the truth of the matter is that there are no fire-resistant plant lists that have been backed by science. What it really comes down to is to consider where a plant is situated and how it's maintained. That's going to make all the difference as to whether or not that's going to be a good choice for your garden. But think about, generally speaking, succulents, low-growing plants like that are non-woody and well-regulated, or high-moisture plants like rock rose, ice plants, or aloe. Shrubs could include hedging roses, honeysuckle, currants, cotoneaster, and shrub apples. Trees you might want to consider are hardwood, maple, poplar, and cherry. So when you're going out to select plants, here's a few questions for you to ask yourself. How large is this plant going to get? This is so important. And it's the number one thing that people forget about. They bring home this little plant in a 4-inch pot, and, over the years, it becomes, it becomes 10 feet. So it's important to know how big a plant is going to be before you plant it. Will it thrive when it's planted? Well, that's important to know. Is it going to get the right amount of water? Will it survive if you give it less water because we're in this thing called a drought? That's really an important consideration. And how low maintenance is it? I mean, we all love our roses, right? But they're not necessarily low maintenance. And, is it really going to, if you've got so much work to do in your garden, do you want to have high maintenance plants? And I don't think the answer to that would be yes. I think it's something that you need to think through and look around at the plants that you're attracted to and ask if it's going to be more maintenance, if that's not something you want to think about down the line or perhaps never. Is it native or low water Mediterranean? That would be a huge thing for you to figure out. And of course, last but not least, is it invasive? If a plant's going to become woody and you have to constantly be cutting it back, that's going to be, that's just going to be more work for you. So you might want to consider other plants instead of the more maintenance ones. Here's a few more high maintenance plants. Bamboo. It has a lot of leaf litter that if a spark should happen to come through, then, it could easily catch fire. And I used to have bamboo, and it was tough to get rid of, but eventually with diligence, you can do it. Another one that you should think about that has an awful lot, you might want to consider, certainly not putting it in and perhaps taking it out. Most people want to put in a juniper because, it fills up its space. And because it's drought tolerant. But the point is that it accumulates so much dead material inside that, it's the dead branches and the debris that can easily catch fire if there's sparks going through the air. And here's some common trees that require more maintenance. The black acacia. We have one here that's, it's about half a block from here, and I can see it from my house. I mean, it's huge. And there's no way, it's just too large to prune. And it's constantly dropping debris, constantly. And then, of course, my favorites were the Italian cypress. I, came back from Italy and had to have Italian cypress. And it wasn't until I joined the Fire Smart Landscaping Committee with Master Gardeners that I realized that when I really looked inside, it was all woody. The green was all on the outside. So if a flame, not a flame, but if a spark should happen to fly and land on that beautiful Italian cypress tree, it's going to go up to the point that the fire department calls these Roman candles. Needless to say, those were the first things that I took out. Sad but true. Avoid invasive plants. Now, we've all heard, I'm sure at one time or another, about pampas grass and how invasive it is. Same with Scotch broom. Oh my gosh, this is everywhere on Mount Tam. Also, even Mexican feathergrass. You'll see an awful lot of this everywhere. And periwinkle. Oops, I think I just switched out the wrong photograph here, but that's okay. Periwinkle is, it's an invasive ground cover, and it's growing, it's got pretty blue flowers, but it's quite invasive and will just take over your garden. So step 6, and it may be one step, but it's involved. So step 6 is make maintenance a priority. In other words, clean up, water, mulch, and prune. For example, you need to get out and clean your gutters and your rooftops as often as possible. And not just in the fall when you think the leaves might be congregating, because we have windstorms all the time and leaves are always blowing. So this is the kind of thing that you need to clear your gutters on a regular basis, or put in those gutter guards. We put in some just a few months ago, and it's really made a big difference. I'm thrilled that we made that decision to do that. Clear everything under the deck. This is unbelievable, and a lot of people are apt to try to keep whatever excess stuff that they accumulate. This is if a spark, a flame, should happen to fly under this deck, needless to say, the fire would go from under your deck and take out your house. Move your wood piles 30 feet from the house, or invest in a fire-resistant tarp. That would make a big help. And then propane tanks and generators, 30 feet from the house and 10 feet from plants. I know that seems like a lot, but if you've got the space, now is the time to do that. So how about water? Well, you want to keep plants hydrated to increase their fire resistance and also to decrease the pests and diseases that they tend to get if they're not watered well. So drip irrigation is by far the best way to go. And, if you're going to keep a lawn, you're going to have sprinklers. I mean, as master gardeners, we suggest that perhaps you replace your lawn because it's taking up valuable water that could be used to put out a fire. So but both drip irrigation and sprinklers need to be monitored to make sure they're in good working condition. The best time to water, if you're on any kind of a plan, is to do it before sunrise. And then you may want to look at investing in the flume. And the flume is a smart water meter that I'm telling you is super easy to install. You don't need a plumber. The flume.com they give great customer service. If you can't figure out how to install it, you pick up the phone and you call them and they'll walk you through it. So you can install it yourself, and yet you'll get alerted if there's any leaks. And you'll know your water consumption every day and what time of day. And you'll be able to moderate that. Also, the Flume company does give great customer service. I was notified of a leak a couple of weeks ago, and I was amazed at how on top of it they were. So think about investing in the loom. When you do that, they have a sale going on right now. But when you do that, you can send them your receipt and you can get 50% of the purchase price refunded to you. So look into that. And then there is the story about mulch. And depending on the zone that you're looking at, zone 0, of course, is the most important one, 0 to 5 feet. This is where you want to have non-combustible mulch, such as inorganic gravel, decomposed granite, which is called DG, stone or decorative rock, and stepping stones. All of that will work in the first 5 feet. The second zone is zone 1, and that is 5 to 30 feet from the house. And this is where you can have wood chips, composted wood chips or bark. And you can have them also in this zone. But you have to be careful because you don't want to have any of the stringy mulches. And what do I mean by the stringy mulches? Well, we call it gorilla hair. Gorilla hair is highly flammable and should not be incorporated into any zone around your house. You also want to avoid any of the dyed mulches. There's a house not too far from here that they put in black mulch, which looks kind of okay, but dyed mulches are flammable. So that really wasn't a very good investment by any means for these people, especially if their house should go up. And then last but not least is that, for many years, we used to say, put down 3 or 4 inches of mulch. And now that we're in the midst of an ongoing fire season, we've come to realize from our recent research that 2 inches is about max of all you need. Anything more than that can smolder in a fire. So here's the fun part. This is where the work begins and you start pruning. You want to take out anything that's dry, dead material, such as I found this picture of this pretty shrub that when they cut away this side, you can see it's total wood on the inside. The only thing that's got any kind of plant material is the outer edge. Same with this below it. This is all wood. So what you see on the outside is fooling you. You need to be pruning back these shrubs desperately, or even replacing them altogether. For trees, you want to take the bottom 6 feet, like I talked about in the spacing slide that I showed you earlier. Take the bottom 6 feet of the tree, or lift the skirt, as I've said, or the bottom third of the overall tree height. Okay, the bottom third. And then 10 feet from the chimney and the roof. So I told you I would talk to you about tools. I'm a big one on having the right tool for the right job. This first one, of course, it doesn't matter the brand of the tool. I think what's important is that whatever tool you buy, you make sure it's comfortable. Don't buy a tool like this online. A regular hand pruner, you're going to be using more than any other tool. So take the time and go into a store. Ask the retailer if you can take it out of the packaging so that you can hold it in your hand. So you can make sure it's comfortable, because they make tools for the right hand, for the left hand. If you've got a large hand or a small hand, you want to make sure that the prune that you invest in is super, super comfortable in your hand. Now, let's say you've got some deficiency in your hand and you just don't have the strength to use a hand pruner like what we were talking about. There are battery-powered pruners, such as this one, that will cut up to about a branch that's about a 1/2 inch thick. And granted, you may have some things that are a little bit thicker than that, but for smaller branches, a good battery-powered pruner can make all the difference of comfort for your hand. And then this is one of my favorites. This is called a short reach cut and hold pruner. So it's about 18 inches long. I love it. It's fantastic for reaching up to my roses. But what's great about it is that when it makes a cut, it holds onto it. So you don't have to bend over to pick it up again. It's a detail. But, when you're getting up there, you don't want to bend over any more than you absolutely have to, especially if you have a bad back. And then here's another way. This is a long reach pruner that will, again, save your back. But what's really important, and I've come to find out with long reach pruners, get a good one that's got a good light. It's got to be lightweight. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to keep holding on to. So make sure it's lightweight. Always see if you can buy one of these products with replaceable parts, and make sure it's comfortable in your hand. And if it's battery powered, make sure that they have rechargeable batteries. And then just a few more tools. They call me Toni the Tool Lady. This is a great saw. And there's a lot of folding saws that are on the market. I particularly like this one because it's got this extra guard on it. So when you're opening it and closing it, see the blade folds right into this, but this is a guard. So you're not going to accidentally hurt yourself opening or closing it. And plus it'll protect your knuckles when you're sawing. And then this is excuse me, sorry. This is the ratchet pruner. And for the longest time, I didn't know what a ratchet pruner or lopper was. This happens to be a lopper, but it gives you leverage so that you can go up to a branch that, half an inch, almost to I'd say, yeah, you can go up to an inch with this one. I've done it. And it gives you leverage so that you can go back in, and it takes it more and more until it finally cuts it. It has 6 steps to it. So this has made all the difference in the world in the work that I've been doing in my garden to make it fire safe. And then a couple more things. An expandable rake. You're going to be doing a lot of raking, trying to clean up all those fallen leaves. So my suggestion would be, this is one that I like because the tines open up from about 7 inches to about 21 or 22 inches. It's great because you can store it, you can, shrink it down, and you can also hang it up. But for most raking jobs, something like this really works, and you can spread it wider in order to rake up leaves and not take up the mulch that's underneath. And then if you really want to have some fun, get yourself a blower. Make sure it's lightweight. I have one that's has a rechargeable battery, and it's better for the planet. Let's face it. It's easier on your body to use, so it's all the way around. I think it's a really good tool that you may want to invest in. So more than anything else, I'm hoping that I've been able to share with you some ideas of how you can protect your home and how you can protect your family. The most important thing is to start at the first 5 feet of defensible space and work out from there. I think, as you've seen in my presentation, mulch and maintenance are 2 really key factors that you should keep in mind. And remember to incorporate adaptive gardening principles whenever you're going to be going out into the garden. Here's how you get a hold of us. We're here for you. Whether, this was actually, I put this into the chat, but this is our website. There's lots of information there. That's where you can reach us by phone or email. You can email the help desk, by the way, with photographs and, bring in samples to our office in a baggie, please. And they can help analyze if you have pest problems, for example. And then there's also the leaflet. And you can, if you take a picture of this QR code, this will bring you to a place where you can subscribe to a seasonal subscription called the leaflet. That'll give you lots of ideas for your garden. You can also arrange for a garden walk, which is just fabulous, where Master Gardeners will come to your home and give you ideas of how you can save water in your garden. And then last but not least is social media. Go to Instagram, Facebook, Nextdoor, and put in Marin Master Gardeners. And there's a plethora of information out there for you. Last but not least, here are 3 websites that will be fantastic resources for you. The first, of course, is Fire Safe Marin. This was established in 1990 after the big East Bay fires. And there's a wealth of information there. MWPA is the where you would go to sign up for free chipper days. And this is where they have a list of those nasty invasive plants that you should be avoiding in your garden. And then, of course, Firewise USA is a wonderful organization that helps for neighbors to get organized and take action to increase ignition resistance in their homes and their communities, and to reduce wildfire risks in their area. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. And I believe there's some people out there that we're going to be monitoring the chat. And let's build it from there. And I think more than anything else, you know, I wanted to thank the Marin County Free Libraries, most particularly Shireen Ash, for being so delightful to work with. She is the librarian at the Corte Madera Library. And I want to thank my associates with the Marin Master Gardeners. The Fire Smart Landscape Committee has just done such amazing work. And I so appreciate the dedication that you've put to this project. Thanks so much.